Oh, let's go to work.
We're good.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors and members of the community. This is the State and City Council meeting for Monday, October 7th, 2019. We are gathered here, and those of a like mind, please join me for a flag salute. I'm going to have to stay seated, but I'm going to be here in heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. 7 o'clock in the evening and a beautiful red sunset out there, and the days grow shorter. Let's see. Any additions to the agenda? I don't think so. Declarations of ex-party contact or conflicts of interest?
Mr. Mayor, I do have one.
You have one.
Yeah, on September 21st, briefly spoke with Ken Carey asking me my thoughts on the resolution that we voted on at the last meeting. Kind of shared his thoughts as well. That was about it. I don't think we actually got to any kind of express support or opposition for anything, but there it is.
Okay. Yes.
I'll also declare that there are two candidates that had submitted letters of intent. I'm not sure that this necessarily is conflict, but it won't. Knowing those individuals will not affect any vote or any decision I have on who we pick for that seat.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
along that line, Ms. Cornwell in the audience did contact me, and I told her to go ahead and contact you regarding letters of interest, so that would be mine.
And as I understand it, she withdrew her letter of interest. Unfortunate, but okay. Let's see. We're going to jump around. I'm going to jump around a little bit on this because we'll move these things along. I've got, I hope, several of the city council vacancy. There's a vacant seat on the council. It has been since August. This process grinds slow, way too slow, even for me, but it is moving. And I asked all the candidates to come tonight and introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves. So I hope I know some of them are here, but I'm going to jump up and let Russ Strohmeyer make a donation to the park fund. If he would do that, and that will let him have his evening.
Russ Strohmeyer, 325 West Washington Street. Just want to let you know our State and Summerfest Car Show, again, was a great success. We had nearly 300 cars attend, and hundreds more people came to the city to view the cars. The State and Summerfest Car Show is our main fundraiser for our Brent Strohmeyer Memorial Scholarship Foundation, which at this point we've given out well over $30,000 in scholarships to area graduating seniors. And one way that the city helps with that is the city, for many years now, has been partnering with our State and Summerfest Car Show and allowing us to use the Neatling and Pioneer Park for no charge. And because it helps, we are officially a nonprofit 501c3 organization. In exchange for that help from the city, our State and Summerfest Car Show makes an annual donation to the Neatling Park Improvement Fund. And to date, I believe we've given out or contributed over $10,000 to that park improvement fund. Would be nice sometime for us to kind of know where that money is going and have a little more involvement. We'd like to be involved and see where that improvement happens. And but at this point, for tonight, I'd like to again donate to that park improvement fund to the tune of $1,000.
All right.
Everybody's got their hand.
Yeah, I don't care to give it to you. Thank you.
The lady, thank you, Russ.
Thank you, Russ.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You know, since over the years you've asked others, but me certainly, to pick a car favorite, you know, and I really enjoyed that. I couldn't do it this summer, and had Chris and his sons. You took your sons to that, didn't you?
I did. I took my boys. We had a really
Yeah.
good time. Really
Yeah.
learned
But
more
that's,
about cars than probably ever needed to. But it was
No, that's-
fun.
That's been a fun part of my summer for a long time, and thank you again, Russ.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, still jumping around a little bit, I have, in comments from the public, I've got, let's see. David, do you want to wait till we get into the public hearing for your comments?
Yeah, we're not.
Okay, all right, then, I've got one here. Patty Armstrong? There's something,
I don't want to go first, but here I go. My name is Patty Armstrong, and I live at 2155 Nighthawk, State in Oregon. Keith, I want you to know, as a person, I like you. We just have a difference of opinion about a few things. After
Patty,
the last council meeting,
can you get up close to that mic, please? Thank you.
thank you. After the last council meeting, I assume it was Keith Campbell met with a news reporter, which led to a published article about Chief's firing. Chief was disciplined for using his personal opinion during job hours and for time management issues. That is according to the news article. If it was Keith that caused this article and in social media to be published, it troubles me greatly. I suspect that people in the department also knew that Charlie would resign when Chief was fired. Keith judged Chief on his personal opinion and time management issues. I believe that Keith should be judged on the same protocol he used on Chief, because he, like all of us, used his personal judgments on his job, and he did during a neighborhood meeting that I attended. And when I was ordering records on the subdivision I live in, he tried to convince me to listen to his version so I would know everything and not have to rely on the records. He told me the depositions were too hard to read and tried to convince me to listen to his knowledge of what happened. Keith wasted, in my opinion, city time talking and writing to me about hearing his side of the story. I had a legal right to these documents. He also wasted my time. He used his personal opinion by telling me to listen to his side. I assume he meant that perhaps I wasn't smart enough to understand what I was reading. I'm a retired investigator, and I've read volumes and volumes of paper during investigations and thousands of depositions. The day after I spoke at a city council meeting about the Phillips addition, Keith publicized a court ruling in the community to show that he was right and the local landowner wrong. It's my personal opinion that when this article came out about Chief, that someone in the city, perhaps Keith, wanted the city's point of view projected, showing Chief was wrong. I have had rumors. I have lots of police friends around the state. I've lived in many different locations, and there are rumors flying all around the state about this council's efforts in whatever. It's a human relations problem for you guys. I don't know whether you know it. And I've heard horrible things about Keith. I don't believe everything I hear. And I've supported you on some issues. I just feel, Keith, that you and I have a different understanding of human relations and empathy and positive and appropriate ways. I manage people. I supervise people. I have fired people. I just will never humiliate them in public like I think happened to Chief and the landowner in my area. May I please continue?
Time.
I cannot continue?
No. Thank you, though.
Okay. Keith,
Thank you.
be the kind of dad your daughter will be proud of.
Okay. Okay, enough of public comments for now. A little bit lighter topic. Let's talk to some of these city council vacancy candidates. In no particular order here, I'm just going to go through the list that I've got, and if your name comes up, please stand up to the mic, tell us who you are, and tell us a little bit about yourself. Steve Frank, are you here? He's not here.
He let us know he wasn't going to be
He
here.
what?
He let us know he wasn't going to be here.
He let us know. He didn't let me know.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
At our
Okay.
coffee with the council.
He let somebody know. All right, thank you, Steve. Ben McDonald. Ben, please.
Hi, I'm Ben McDonald. I live at 888 North Douglas. I've lived and worked around the state now for almost 9 years. Excuse my voice, I'm on the downhill slope of about a pneumonia. I'm the IT manager at JELD-WEN. I have been since January of 2011. I have 2 kids, that fourth grader and a sixth grader. One's about to turn 10 tomorrow. I have been coming to the meetings when I can and watching all of them on YouTube, and I'm just decided that I wanted to have a little bit more vested interest in the dealings in town, and knowing that I'm going to be here long term, at least till my boys are out of high school, that I'd like to get involved and help solve some of the city's problems, and just get involved in the community. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Are we allowed to ask any questions?
Hi. I guess I need to
Mr.
do this every meeting.
Mr. Mayor, are we
Tell
allowed?
people if you want to speak on these comments from the public to get these things up here in a timely manner, or we can wait until the next comments period at the end of the meeting. But anyway,
Mr.
let's
Mayor,
move on with this. Yo.
are we just hearing from them, or are
Yes,
we allowed to
we
ask?
are.
We allowed to ask any questions?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not tonight. I'll make a pick and you
What
can
what
ask
would be
questions.
okay? So what would be a good avenue to be able to ask them
I don't
questions?
know.
Is that a question for Keith, or?
Well, this is what I thought, an opportunity for all of us to see these folks. And then I'm going to talk to them more, and I'm going to bring you a name in 2 weeks.
So should we send you questions that we
You
have?
could do that.
Okay.
That'd be fine.
Thank you.
Casey Faulkner. Casey? No? Kara Blocker? There she is. Okay.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Kara Blocker. I own Rising Star Studios on 220 East Ida next to Hugo's Pizza. It's a music, theater, dance studio where we teach kids, all ages, the arts. We've been operating in Staten for 5 years. I met my husband Keith, who grew up here 6 years ago and got married and moved here, and I fell in love with Staten. So I have been walking these streets of this town, just falling in love with it for the last 6 years. I've never lived in a town this size, and I realized the benefit of it. Our business has grown mostly through word of mouth, which has been fantastic for us. Staten has been very welcoming and very helpful to our business, so we're very, very thankful for that. I have a caveat, which is that 2 years ago we moved back to Salem to care for Keith's mother, and she passed away last Monday. And so we are now house hunting back in Staten again. So I might not be allowed to be included in this, so unless we can find a place pretty soon. So that's what's happening. But we love it here. We don't own our studio. We're renting there, but we would love to own it there. We'd love to establish ourselves here for a very long time. And I'm happy for any questions, Jordan. You can ask me anytime that you want.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. I should tell you, our neighbors of a year just put their house up for sale. I don't know why. No, really, it wasn't because of us, unless they don't like the dog barking once in a while. But it's on the corner of 4th and Jefferson. Big white, very nicely kept place. And I'm surprised they're moving, but that's what happens. Anyway, that's not an ad or anything, just a thought. Yeah, if you can establish residence in the next couple of weeks, we'd be happy to have you again. Yeah. Kip Yarnell. Mr. Yarnell? Are you here? No? Okay. Laura Beagle. Laura, thank you.
Good evening. Am I supposed to give my address?
Oh,
Okay.
you can.
I live at
You live on
623
Summerview, it says.
Yeah.
Okay.
I currently work in Salem, but I live here in Stayton. I'm the operations manager at an insurance company. I've worked the last 15 years volunteering through Rotary. Our club has changed. I was president of the Rotary Club. My year ended in June, and so I'm looking for other opportunities to help give back to the community. So this was suggested to me to maybe come and see if there's anything that I can do using some of my skills to help support the community. So that's why I applied.
Well, in your letter, I think I mentioned to somebody,
It's ridiculously
maybe I was
thorough.
talking to myself, but I thought if I had an opportunity to hire an economic development person, I would just throw the job at you, just on the basis of the kinds of things you do and know how to do and like to do. So,
Well, I did notice that you had already had a retreat and developed a report based on that retreat. So the letter that I added, yes, was super thorough. But I wanted to make sure that whoever jumps into this position is going to have to kind of hit the ground running, and so that you would know where my background is in each of those goals that you've set for the next 5-year plan.
yeah, that's fine. The job is just for a year.
Yes.
That person would have to stand for election in November of 20. So it's something, though. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's see. And last but not least, Mark Cronquist. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and citizens. Mark Cronquist. I live in Stayton Castle, 308 East Water Street. Sort of hard to miss it. I moved to Stayton from Lake Oswego in October of 2013. Among the first characters I met was a gentleman named Hank, who at the time was a city councilor, who had a gun shop downtown. I have been in FFL, and I think the history of firearms and other things are fascinating. So I went to talk to Hank one night, and a tumbleweed blew down 3rd Avenue. And Hank said, "Isn't that just the perfect metaphor for this town?" And he's right, at the time. There are probably a lot of better things we could do with our nights, but there are a few that are least impactful than being on council, serving as planning commissioner, serving as vice chair of the Parks Board, serving on the Parks Board itself, being liaison to the school district, and a few other things here too. We have made a huge positive difference. Where Brent stored his toys, we now have a brewery that attracted almost 1,500 people on their grand opening night. We have a town that is vibrant. The only building that I know of that's vacant of any time is the Porter-Lau building, and I believe that that is structurally unsound. But there's a lot to do. We've lost NORPAC number 1. That's 460 jobs, roughly, and a large processing facility. How can we recover from that? That's going to be a large economic loss to our town. What can we do as a council to pull together and get development there? I am pro-responsible development. And, something needs to happen, and we need to move while we're moving forward. We've got a lot of great things that have been planned. I served as counselor and did not stand for re-election because my parents, who were in their late 80s and 90s, were gravely ill, and they still are. But the immediate crisis has passed. Anyway, I'm a native Oregonian, 4th generation, proud parent of a daughter who's in med school and working for the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, and a son who's a programmer, senior programmer for Microsoft at age 24, with 50-odd people working for him now. I look around and I go to places like Sweets and Treats, or I see Rising Star Music, and I see the success stories where there were once were nothing, and want to be a part of making that, keeping that momentum going, picking the pieces up when things like NORPAC happen. It's not a popularity contest, it never will be. The other important thing is the fact that the money belongs to the people. We need to have huge fiscal accountability out there. We can't just rubber stamp budget meetings, and I know that sometimes I'm bullheaded and a bit outspoken, but also at other times the truth is in the numbers. I don't think there's any real bad malfeasance or anything, but there is a responsibility for all of us to look at those numbers because the money does belong to the people. Thank you, and I'd love to have any questions from anybody.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, and let's see. Carmen, would you like to wait until we get into that public hearing on food trucks?
That sounds fine.
Would that be all right? Okay, remind me to recognize you at some point,
Thank you.
please. Like wave or stand up and yell or something. Okay. All right, let's go on to, I think that's it, unless there's someone else here that had an application that I missed. Let's go to consent agenda, if we could.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Okay. Got a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, and there's no discussion on the motion. Okay, now, are these going to dribble in all night? Carrie, can...
No, I thought because it was a public hearing, I didn't have to do it. It was my mistake. Sorry.
Well, you really don't, but
Food truck.
should we just wait?
Yes, sir.
That's fine, thank you. Okay, all in favor on the motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
Aye.
Aye? Okay, opposed, same sign? Motion passed. All right, we are moving into business. Thank goodness, a public hearing. It's 7:25. An ordinance number 1037, amending the land use code to establish clear and objective standards for residential development. So commencement of public hearing and opening statement. Mr. Fleischman.
You should have an opening statement to read.
Oh, I should have an
Mr.
opening
Mayor.
statement. Oh, I should have an, it all comes back to me. Where are they? Alyssa, did you hide the opening statements again? It's underneath something here. Why don't I pay attention to these things? Well, I don't know. Oh, she hit him. It's not my fault. No. Okay. Let's see, this is number one. So, good evening. My name is Henry Porter. As mayor, I'll be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for the public hearing in the matter of land use file number 8-05/19 concerning legislative amendments to the Land Use Development Code to bring the code into compliance with state law requiring standards for residential development to be clear and objective. The hearing is now open. The back counter is an agenda for this evening's meeting, which lays out the order in which people will be called on to speak during the public hearing. Copies of the proposed amendments, the city's rules of procedure for land use public hearings, and a brochure written to facilitate your participation in the public hearing. You're encouraged to obtain and read a copy of these documents as well. At this time, I would ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice for this hearing. I hear none. To the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case? I hear none. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any members of this body? I hear none. When it's your turn to speak, please state your name and address for the record. As a participant in the hearing, the city is required to notify you of the final results of the process. We are now ready for the staff report. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. The issue before you is a public hearing, Ordinance 1037, which is a relatively short list of amendments to the Land Use and Development Code in order to bring it into compliance with state law. About a year and a half ago, the legislature enacted and Governor Brown signed a bill that made changes to state law so that it now requires that local governments, such as the city of Stayton, may only apply, quote, clear and objective, unquote, standards to residential development. ORS 197, Section 307 includes those provisions and states, in part, except as provided below, a local government may adopt and apply only clear and objective standards, conditions, and procedures regulating the development of housing. The standards, conditions, and procedures may include provisions regulating the density or height, but may not have the effect either in themselves or cumulatively of discouraging needed housing through unreasonable cost or delay. So following enactment of that statute and it becoming effective, I believe, last year, I requested the city attorney to review various sections of our Land Use and Development Code as they apply to residential development. Together, we identified a number of provisions in the current code that either are subjective or perhaps are not exactly clear. They contain ambiguous language or both. So you have in front of you a set of prepared amendments that have been forwarded to you by the Planning Commission. The intent of these amendments is to clarify ambiguous language and make the standards for all types of residential development to be more objective. In summary, these changes will require garages to have the same exterior materials as the house, clarify the siding requirements for manufactured homes, establish a defined slope above which the exposed material enclosing the underside of a manufactured home may exceed 12 inches on the downhill side, modify the purposes of the standards for multifamily developments to remove subjective purposes, clarify standards for balconies and outdoor corridors in multifamily developments, and other similar amendments to make the code more clear and more objective. Planning Commission held a hearing at their June meeting and have forwarded these to you with their unanimous recommendation for their adoption. If you've got any questions, I will entertain them.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Could we have persons in favor of this speak at this time? Is there anyone? Okay. The idea of what? Conforming clear and objective standards for residential development. Okay. Anyone? Persons opposed? Other interested persons? Questions from the council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
I just have one. So with the first one, I lost my page. Talking about the garage having to have the same exterior materials. Is that just an aesthetic? To make sure that it...
Currently, the code, and it has for years and years,
What says like matching?
has required that a garage have exterior materials matching the home. I'm hoping my slacks and shirt match, but they're not the same.
So this is
So
matching
this
is
is-
subjective.
And what matches could be considered a subjective criteria.
Certainly.
And so a more objective criteria, and one that is more clear, is that the garage have the same materials as the home.
Okay.
Okay.
I
Other
just-
questions or
yeah.
thoughts?
I mean, I get that that's clarifying. I guess
And
I'm looking
sometimes
at it
I
and
think my
I'm...
slacks and shirt match, and sometimes my wife lets me know otherwise.
Okay. Other,
I guess I just don't
anything?
think that it really matters in general, but I see the clarity.
I would agree that a lot of these don't really matter, but the legislature has told us to get rid of unclear and subjective language out of our code.
Fair enough.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Just a quick question, Dan. So, I mean, reading through the amendments, it's mostly just taking matching and then making it more, but there are some specifics like the slope, for example, or the direction of the slats on the front of a manufactured home. I assume those standard numbers like the 10% slope, greater than 10% is a standard for development, or...
It's a slope that, one, we don't have very much of around here in Stayton. We're a pretty flat town.
Yeah,
So it's not,
some places.
except on the side of the few hills that we have, it's probably not going to apply. It was, there's no magic of why it's 10 and not 8 or 12, but it was an attempt to have an objective standard for if you have a slope less than that, then you can't have more than 12 inches of the enclosing material exposed, as opposed to the current code that just says when the site has a sloped grade.
Got it, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Anything from the council? Let's go to a staff summary then. Dan?
I don't have too much more to add. The proposed changes are, for the most part, relatively minor technical changes, which are an attempt to make the code more clear and more objective as we regulate housing.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'm going to close the hearing and go to council deliberation. There's no one waving their arms and wanting the hearing to be left open, so...
I have a question.
Yes,
Another
go
question.
ahead, do it now,
Mr. Mayor.
please.
Okay, so you said that was a specific example, but are they, so I'm just reading, just as another example, entries recessed a minimum of 30 inches. Are there other figures that are actually based on, you know, maybe a concern of mine is that what happens if someone comes in, like we make these numbers, and is it better to have a number that's arbitrary or language that is ambiguous?
The legislature has told us we may not have ambiguous language.
Seems clear enough.
And
No, and
again,
I see that point, but do you
Right.
see to my point where
I
if it's just
do,
an
so-
arbitrary number and then someone comes in and they're like, well, that's not feasible,
Right.
then we have another issue.
Well, I think for all of these standards that we're proposing to change, there are no cases where it's not going to be feasible.
Okay. So they're
Again, you know,
generous?
looking at the example that you brought up of, the code today says that multifamily buildings must, on the sides that face a street, have a certain number of design features. And there is a list of 13 different types of design features that they can choose to incorporate into their design. one of them today says recessed entry. Well, does that mean a ½ inch? Or 6 inches? So what the Planning Commission has recommended to you to say, in order for an entry to count as a recessed entry, it needs to be 30 inches deep, for that the front of the building sticks out 30 inches in front of the doorway, and then it will count as a recessed entry. So I don't see that somebody could say, oh, that's not feasible, I can't set my door in 30 inches. If they can't, there's 11 other design features to choose from, and if it's a building with between 2 and 6 units in it, they only need to have 5.
Okay, is that it? All right. Hearing's closed and council deliberation. What else is there to fight about here, folks? What would you like to do? We're presented with some options. We can continue the hearing. We can close the hearing and approve the first consideration. Well, we've already closed the hearing. Approve the ordinance with modifications, or close the hearing and retain the code unchanged. So what would you like to do?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I move to approve the ordinance number 1037 as presented.
as presented?
As
As presented, okay, so, first consideration of ordinance 1037, approval. All right, is there a second?
Before we do that, I'm just curious, is now an appropriate time, if we see anything here, to just strike it? Because I'm kind of getting,
We've got a motion
it seems, sorry.
No. If we don't get a second, then the motion dies, and then you can jump in. I don't hear a second, so...
I'll rescind it, my motion.
Yeah.
Okay, it's dead.
Yeah, Mr.
Go
Mayor,
ahead.
what I was going to say is it seems like there's elements of this code that current council thinks that maybe could be changed or removed. Am I getting that correctly from the two of you?
Not at all, actually.
No. Okay.
I just wanted to know where the numbers came from, if they,
Okay.
you know, if there was any debate during the commission when it was heard.
Right.
You know, but I heard none, so.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
There was the same amount of testimony at the Planning Commission's public hearing
Right.
that you heard at tonight's public hearing.
Okay. Well, that's all I had. Thank you before we go to voting here.
So,
You just, Mr. Mayor, you just know that, I mean, what happens is we say, okay, this is good, and then afterwards, that's when people come up, and that's when they're mad, because not during the public hearing all the time. So that's where my concern came from, but if these are standards that you think,
well, do I understand?
you know, I'm not the expert on this, so I
Okay,
have
well-
to defer
Well, I'm
to
not
the
either.
Planning Commission.
Let me
and to
ask,
Mr.
Dan,
Fleischman.
we understand most of this is coming from the legislature.
The
No.
need,
You're not grabbing this out of thin air here.
the need to do this is coming
Right.
from the legislature and the statutes that they have enacted. These specifics that in front of you is coming from the city attorney, from staff, and from the Planning Commission.
All right. Okay.
Okay, actually, one more question then.
All right.
So, do we need to specify how many pillars or poles? Or, I know that's kind of getting to the weeds, but there's, some of them have specific, like you said, the 30 minimum of 30 inches, and other ones have, it just says pillars or posts, but it doesn't mention how many pillars or posts.
So
You would assume
therefore-
that's two, at least two, because it's a plural. Dormers, but is there a specification on size? I'm really not trying to be difficult.
Right,
I'm,
no, well, the
Yeah, you are.
code defines what constitutes a pillar or post.
Okay.
And requires a minimum horizontal dimension.
Perfect.
So that you don't
Thank you.
stick up a 2x4
Okay,
and call that a pillar.
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Other questions and thoughts? Deliberations or Or
Okay,
we can go to council decision on this if you're ready.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the ordinance number 1037 as presented.
Okay.
Seconded.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1037 as presented. And is there any other discussion? Okay, Alyssa, would you poll the council, please, on this one?
Sure. Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
3-0, all right. Let's see, and does that become a final decision?
No.
I don't think, we have to bring it back again?
If the vote was unanimous, then
unanimous within the group here, yeah.
unanimous among those present and voting with a number greater than 3, then it...
3 or better, huh? Okay.
3 or better, yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry, not greater than 3.
All right, then we'll consider that a done one, and the city council's decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days in accordance with the Oregon Revised Statutes 197.830. And moving right along to the next item that probably most of the group is here for tonight, maybe not all, but some, most, is ordinances 1038 and 9 establishing a permit process for conducting business in the street right-of-way. It is a public hearing, and so here we go again with this. Good evening, my name again is Hank Porter. I'm the mayor of the city of Stayton. I'll be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for a public hearing in the matter of proposed amendments to the State Municipal Code regarding conducting business activity within the public right-of-way. The hearing's now open. At the back counter is an agenda for this evening's meeting which lays out the order in which parties will be called on to speak during the public hearing. The hearing will be conducted in accordance with the general hearing procedures of the City Council's rules. The hearing will begin with a staff report. I will then ask for testimony from the public. The hearing may be continued for further evidence or testimony. If the hearing is closed, the council will deliberate on the proposal. Everyone who participates is asked to start their presentation by introducing themselves by name, giving any affiliation, and their address. Participants are requested to limit their comments to 3 minutes and are further requested to avoid repetition. If someone else has already expressed your thoughts, it's perfectly all right to simply state agreement with the statements of the previous speaker. All testimony, arguments, and evidence received during this public hearing must be directed toward the appropriate approval criteria or to such other rule, law, regulation, or policy which you believe to apply to this case. If there are any documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by the council, they must include the submitter's name and address, must be signed, dated, and formally placed into the record of the hearing. To do that, either before or after you speak, please leave the material with the Administrative Service Manager at the staff table. The Administrative Service Manager will make sure your documents are included in the record. And at this time, I'd ask the audience if there are any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any members of the council.
Again, Mr. Mayor, I had a conversation on the 21st of September with Ken Carey regarding that. Yeah.
Okay. Any others? Okay, then we're now ready for the staff report. Mr. Flashman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. In May of 2018, the City Council enacted Ordinance 1018 that established licensing requirements and standards for the operation of food trucks, which in our code are formally known as mobile food units. As enacted and as currently in the city code, food trucks must be located on private property and may not operate in the public street, except as part of a event that's going on or unless a street closure permit has been issued by the city. In April, of this year, staff presented to the City Council Ordinance 1031, which would have amended the standards for food trucks to allow them to operate at certain locations in city streets. The council at that time expressed some willingness to consider the changes, but expressed a number of concerns and asked staff to return with some more information. We did that, I believe, in late May. The council scheduled a public hearing on the issue and held that hearing on July 1. And then following the July 1 public hearing, the council put off any deliberation or discussion on the issue until mid-September. On September 16th, staff came back to council essentially suggesting that we abandon Ordinance 1031 that you had held the hearing on, and we came to you with a different direction for addressing the issue. Probably most of the testimony at the July hearing or the previous meetings, was from downtown business owners and property owners expressing concern with the possibility of a food truck setting up shop in front or near their business or building where it may not be wanted. So in September, when we came back to you, we came back with the idea of, rather than just changing the regulations where food trucks can set up, let us establish a system where a business, that is a brick and mortar business so-called, can come in and get a permit to do business in the public right-of-way. And that would have accomplished two different objectives. One, it would have dealt with the issue of allowing food trucks to set up in the street, but not allowing them to set up, shall we say, where they're not wanted. And secondly, it would deal with the existing businesses in the downtown area that currently are doing business or have been doing business in the city right-of-way by having cafe tables, chairs, where table service is provided for eating and drinking establishments, and other businesses that routinely display merchandise on the public sidewalk. And setting standards for the use of the public sidewalk for those sidewalk cafes and sidewalk vendors, for lack of a better term. We based the suggestions that we brought to you in September on code that was in place, mostly Hillsborough's code, but we also looked at code in Gresham and Eugene and Bend and Mount Angel. At the September 16th meeting, council established tonight for a second public hearing. And also following that meeting, staff met to discuss the proposed standards. The interim deputy police chief, the public works director, myself, and the city manager met, and as a result of that discussion and our concerns over the problems that would be associated with administration and enforcement and carrying out the ideas that have been presented to you on September 16th, staff is currently proposing no changes to the regulations governing food trucks. We reviewed the option of allowing food trucks to use the public right-of-way. We've discussed it with the city attorney. We've researched communities in Oregon that do or do not allow food trucks in the public right-of-way. And I posted a request to hear from other cities on the City Planning Directors Association's listserv to get input and feedback. We had Public Works office staff make some phone calls around as well. The cities of Salem, Silverton, Kaiser, Corvallis, Hillsborough, Tualatin, Mount Angel, Brownsville, and Morrow do not allow food trucks to operate in the street right-of-way. Portland, Eugene, Springfield, Bend, and Lincoln City are the 5 cities that we've been able to determine that do or allow food trucks to operate in the street right-of-way. However, they have very specific requirements or geographic areas of the city where they either are allowed or are not allowed. The city of Portland does not allow them in the what's called central downtown development area or something like that, which includes everything that I would think of as close to downtown Portland on both sides of the river. Eugene specifies 2 locations, one downtown, one near the university campus, where they're allowed. Bend has very specific intersections where they are allowed, and I guess there must be enough demand, considering the supply, that they actually hold a lottery to determine which spot the food truck operator gets to park at. And in Lincoln City, it appears that it's actually a concession agreement where the city gets 10% of the food truck operator's revenue in exchange for the privilege of operating on the city streets. So again, based on our discussions with the city attorney, based on our research and internal conversation, staff at this time does not recommend changing our current food truck regulations to allow food trucks in the street right-of-way. Our concerns, as I mentioned earlier, are enforcement of the program, increased staff time, setting precedent, setting standards for some new process for a smaller sized city. How do we properly value the ability to do business in the public right-of-way, equitability, etc. So with that, knowing that we had previously presented to you these ideas, you have, in what's a rather unusual move for us, 2 different ordinances in your packet. Ordinance 1038 reflects our staff's recommendation that food trucks not be permitted to operate within the street right-of-way. As presented, Ordinance 1038 establishes a permit system that authorizes businesses to utilize a portion of the sidewalk and establishes standards for such use. Among these standards are that the activity must be placed directly in front of the associated establishment. It may not be in front of a building entrance and must leave an unobstructed pedestrian travel space equal to the width of the doorway, between the doorway and the curb. It must leave a 5-foot unobstructed width of sidewalk and a 2-foot buffer from the curb. Merchandise may be displayed only within 30 inches of the exterior wall of the building housing the business, and no vending machines are allowed. Standards are also established for the operation of sidewalk cafes, which are defined as seating and/or customer service on the sidewalk as the extension of the regular service area of a restaurant or cafe. These standards are similar to the ones I just mentioned for other sidewalk vendors, but also address some operational considerations such as the clearing of tables of dirty dishes and umbrellas at the table. Ordinance 1038 would legitimize the current use of public sidewalks by the number of businesses in the city and establish standards for that use. Staff has briefed those businesses currently conducting business on the public sidewalk of the proposed standards, and I believe I see a few of them here this evening. Alternately, should council choose to pursue what we've talked about in our previous meetings, Ordinance 1039 is presented if you wish to continue to the discussion of allowing food trucks in the street right-of-way. In addition to all of the requirements for sidewalk vendors, the standards for food trucks are established in 1039, and these standards are that the food truck must be placed directly in front of the business obtaining the permit. The food truck may be located only on a local street, not an arterial or collector street. It must be in a legal parking space, at least 20 feet from the crosswalk at an intersection. Service windows must face the curb, not the travel way. It must be adjacent to a sidewalk that is a minimum of 6 feet in width. It may not be located in the street right-of-way before 4 p.m. and shall not be parked in front of the business obtaining the permit for more than 7 hours. And finally, the use of a generator or other noise-producing device must be muffled so as not to be audible at a distance of 35 feet from the food truck. So again, this recommendation from staff is the enactment of Ordinance 1038 as presented, which would require food trucks to be on private property, but would establish standards for sidewalk cafes and other sidewalk vendors. So at the proper time, I'm available to answer any of your questions, as is other members of the staff.
Okay. Thank you, Dan, for now. If we run into confusion on this, we'll sort it out. Opening statement, staff summary. Already did that. Persons in favor. Who would like to speak in favor of this interesting set of ordinances? Anyone?
You're in favor of one.
Yeah.
All I know is I'm supposed to wave my hands.
3839, 103839. That's,
Should we do them separately?
what's that?
Let's do them separately.
Well, let's do 1038. Okay?
Yes.
In favor, please. Carrie?
Carrie Sessoms, 510 North 3rd Avenue. Wait, 1501 East Burnett. Owner, Covered Bridge Cafe at 510 North 3rd. I am in favor of 1038, keeping food trucks on private property. And I'm also in favor of paying permit fees for sidewalk tables and chairs. I don't have any problem doing that. I think that it's
Okay.
good.
Okay.
That's all.
So,
Do I need to get up and say opposed to 1039? Should I just
you
state
don't,
that now?
I don't think you have to. I'm going to try to clarify that here momentarily.
All right.
Dan, this is going to get more interesting as we go through this. Should people declare their excitement for, let's say, 1038 and not for 1039? How do you want to do this? Or just not say anything about one or the other?
I would suggest, perhaps in this case, it is appropriate to not worry about the categories of opponents, proponents, and other testimony, and just take public comment on the issues that are before you.
Fair enough. So you are in favor of 1038?
So just...
Keeping food trucks on private property.
Okay.
And allowing a permit process for special events and sidewalk tables and chairs.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if we're going to play this fast and loose, others that want to speak on this topic, please.
My name is Carmen Wen. I live in Salem, Oregon at 8684 Jackson Hill Road. I have a food truck that I operate there that I occasionally bring here to Salem, or to Staten. As far as which one, it got very confusing there for me for a moment, but I just wanted to state that though I'm not sure which way y'all are planning to vote today, I think that maybe less is more, and that maybe proposing that places like specifically Snow Peak, where they are economically kind of needing food and are relying on food trucks to provide something, and maybe 2 other spots in Salem, or in Staten, my bad, while everybody feels out the idea of having food trucks on the right-of-way, would be a good thing to think about. Snow Peak doesn't necessarily have a place for food trucks. They're putting them on the opposite side of the road, which I feel with people going and having a beer and they're having their kids around and stuff maybe isn't the appropriate place for them. I feel like the sidewalk is large enough and the area in front of Snow Peak is large enough to be able to park there. And I think that finding another couple of places in Stayton to allow food trucks to park on the right-of-way and testing the waters, and then maybe revisiting it next year to see if it worked out or not before we decide, let's just make a blanket rule. We made that mistake in Salem. They offered us the right-of-way in industrial areas, and we kind of wanted to be able to go into the more of the downtown area. Talk about bigger cities like Portland and such. It's the core area, the very downtown, that's inaccessible. And I think that, like 3rd Street, I can understand that, but some of the other areas, I don't think it's that big of a deal. So I feel like maybe testing the waters is the best way to do it.
Okay. Just a quick thought. This Snow Peak Brewing, that's been kind of that's sort of been the test, hasn't it?
It kind of has.
Because of their frontage on the street. And, yeah, I'm not, personally not sure what to do with that either, except it is a kind of unique situation for us.
Well, and if I could put a little bug in that, in front of the building is a fantastic place to park. I believe, in my opinion, the sidewalk is wide enough that a truck could scoot just a little bit with the passenger side wheels just right at the edge of that sidewalk so it doesn't take up quite as much of the roadway, and be able to serve in that location specifically without blocking an intersection, without blocking any of the entryways, and the pedestrians would have plenty of room to get in and out of the building. We've had situations like that in Salem and it works just fine. Snow Peak, as a new business, is going to depend on food trucks. They do not have a kitchen. So economically for Stayton, it just makes sense to allow food trucks to park there. And I think testing in some of the other areas for businesses that may not be able to make it to the downtown core area to get something to eat wouldn't be such a bad idea.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else? David, you wanted to get up there and say something at some point here?
David Nielsen, 2069 Cardinal Avenue. Shoot, I'll probably say more than I want to now because I'll have to. Just to respond to the last idea, I have a different opinion about Snow Peak. I think a truck parked right in front of those doors would be a disincentive for me to go down there. I think it would kind of kill the ambiance, but that's a business decision. That's their business model or plan. It's not really a policy decision for you guys, I don't think. Anyway, I didn't plan on speaking against or in favor of food trucks on the private property. I really don't think with the opportunities there are now, or on public property, with the opportunities there are now for private property, it seems like it's working. I just don't see that a policy change is warranted. But if you were going to have a policy change, I don't really think some of the provisions in there are clear, at least to me, and kind of address all of the problems the problem that I have. Number one is there's lines in here that are plural and lines that are singular. And I'm not clear if this is limited to a permit that gets one truck at one time in one space in front of one business, or if they can get a permit to have multiple trucks, depending on how many street parking spaces there are directly in front of their business. Can they get more than one? So that was one thing. After reading over this like 6 times, I couldn't figure that out. But the main thing I wanted to talk on is the most obnoxious things that I see with food trucks, and that's those generators. And I think it's just worse to just open it up into private space. It's bad enough on public property. Some of those, or private property, some of those generators are so loud that the food truck operators don't even want them near them. They have them extended out with extension cords. And the provision in here just says, it shall be muffled so as not to be audible at a distance of 35 feet from the mobile food unit. But it doesn't say it actually has to be on board the unit or adjacent to it. I mean, it should say they can't be remote if you're going to allow them. But the idea of audible, that's a thing the legislature, which you just addressed, that you couldn't have things subjective. That's certainly subjective. I know people in here, sorry Jerry, but he could probably sit right next to one and not hear it. And then is it audible, you know, in the middle of the afternoon when there's no crowd, or audible when there's a crowd and a lot of noise? If a permit is going to allow a food truck in front of a business every single day as part of their business model, there should be provisions that they provide house power and not generators. If they're generators, there should be something else. They should be inverter type, which are inherently quieter. There should be some way to address it.
All right, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Okay, someone else? David Nielsen, that was Carrie.
Mayor?
Yes.
I got a comment.
Go ahead.
James Taylor, own Jet Auto, 210 East Water Street, actually working right now in a house outside of town. The thing I do see when it comes to the issue of Snow Peak and food trucks being across the street, not only some of them with noisy generators, but the big thing I see there is an issue with people that are, you know, maybe they have one drink, two drink, whatever, and crossing a road that's dark. If the city is not going to allow food trucks to be in front of there, you ought to look at maybe putting a stop sign on the corner of 3rd and Water, just to slow the traffic down enough so that people that are coming around that corner, because there's a parking spot there on the street, blocks visibility. There's brush in the parking lot of, you know, or on the property of Napa that hampers vision. And then it's, you know, it's dark. And if you've got somebody that's had a, you know, some people, 5 drinks, not a problem. Other people, half a drink, you know, impaired judgment. In the case, if somebody gets hit out there, it's going to raise a lot of legal issues. Who's at fault? The person that walked across the road, the motor vehicle operator, the bartender that served maybe too much, the blockage of view via, whether it be landscaping, a vehicle on a public street, the lack of good lighting down there. It just opens a whole lot of stuff. So,
James, how about the municipality that allowed the activity in the first place?
There's exactly that. There's so many different things going on. So even if you guys don't do something, maybe look at addressing something traffic-wise. As simple as just install a stop sign down there on the corner, just to slow the traffic down. I know it's a 20-mile-an-hour zone, but I speak for experience. There may be a 20-mile-an-hour sign on the road. No. It becomes quite the highway sometimes down through there. People racing through.
Okay.
They think it's after 5 o'clock. Hey, it's downtown. There's nobody around. Well, there's still businesses down there. You know, Snow Peak's there till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock some nights. So it's just something to think about.
All right. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Bet. Someone else, please. Come on.
My name is Min Nguyen. I'm from Salem, Oregon. I own a food truck myself. And I agree with this gentleman over here where a business should provide power for the truck that comes and serve at their business so it's not so noisy in the downtown area where which would be good for all businesses if there's not so much noise. So as a food truck owner myself, we do have a generator that has an inverter in it, but as the gentleman stated before, that he wants like 30 feet, that you can't hear it from 30 feet, you'll still hear that generator within 30 feet, 30, 35 feet with the inverter, a quiet generator, because we own one. So it would make it impossible for us to operate with that kind of ruling. And you can always set a noise ordinance where you can set a certain decibel for the generator, the noise that you would like. So that's pretty much all I have to say, is I agree with this gentleman that a business that would want you to come and serve food at their establishment should provide some kind of power so it's not so noisy.
Yep, 100-foot plug, right?
Exactly, thank you.
Big one. Okay, thank you. Someone else? Is that it? Yeah, Steve.
I'm Steve Poison. My address is 1750 East Pine Street. Just sort of two procedural questions. One, I seem to recall at a city council meeting I attended sometime in the past that one of the owners of Snow Peak was here and said they did not need a truck to be able to park on the street, that they had other provisions that they could make other than parking across the street. That's my recollection, but I guess if you're going to make a decision based on that business, you might want to check with that business and see if that's really a need. Second, if you were going to consider making a decision based on that business, I think that goes against your previous decisions. I remember many discussions about Mick and Moms and how it was not fair to make a decision for one business that didn't apply to others. So I'd caution you about doing that in this case. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Someone else? Yes?
One more thing real quick.
Oh, get up there.
Do I need to restate all the stuff?
Big voice so we can all hear, please.
Do I need to restate all of my information?
Yeah.
So I'm Carmen from Salem, 8684 Jackson Hill.
I'm sorry, do that again. Louder, please.
Carmen Nguyen from 8684 Jackson Hill, Salem, Oregon, with the food truck. I just wanted to address his statement about Snow Peak saying they could make other provisions. It was attempted. We tried it. The slope is too hard, and so with the fryers or grills or anything like that, it actually is non-functional. It was a great thought. It was a private residence, and so thoughtful that he was allowing us to utilize it and plug in. However, if it's not functional, it's not functional. The closest thing besides a street front would be the, pardon me that I don't remember the name, it's like the little water thingy. Right. Thank you. So that's level and it's close and it's on that same side of the street, but it does state no parking. Therefore, it's not something that we can utilize without permission. But so the area that was allowed to us is just not something that's going to be feasible.
Okay.
So when he did make the statement, it was true. It's just not now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we seeing any light even toward the end of the tunnel here? I don't know. Let's go on. Someone else. Other thoughts and comments on this? Counselors? Jump in if you like, or when you're ready.
You can ask questions?
Well, sure.
Okay. Mr. Mayor and Dan, I have a question about, under the permit application number 9, it says the non-refundable fee set by, the non-refundable fee will be set by the council. When, if we move forward with any of these, when would that happen? And how do we decide what that fee is?
If either of these ordinances is enacted this evening, staff will be back to you at your next meeting with a resolution to amend the city's fees and the fees resolution to include a fee for this permit. Staff does not have a number in mind at this point, but the discussion that we have had is that it needs to be a number that is more than just reflects the city's administrative cost of handling the permit, but reflects that there is economic value to the business to be doing business on public property, that it essentially is, they're expanding the business area above and beyond which they're renting or owning, and there is economic value to that. So what we will be back with a number should one of these ordinances pass.
Mr. Mayor, follow up.
Go ahead again.
In the event that
keep on.
we go that direction, can we use other cities to help us come up with that number too?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
We will do that. We
Okay.
will provide some of that information to you.
Then, Mr. Mayor, I have another question.
Go on.
So with the rules on either one of these, 1038 or 1039, and maybe this is a question for you, Ty, how does enforcement work? And I feel like some of the concerns specifically are about the generators, but just in general, and that too, please.
Well, 1039 specifically, I believe, was the 35-foot. I mean, that's from here to the wall. Again, allocating resources, police resources in particular, it's not the best use of our time. Decibel readers, I don't know if you want us out there with decibel readers. It kind of goes back to the last time I was sitting here and we were talking about 10 feet and 20 feet and smoking. It's, in theory, I understand what the objective is and what we're trying to reach here with the businesses and giving them opportunities, but it creates a lot of issues for enforcement because people are going to point and ask who's enforcing what and when and how and where. Is there, the other 1039 part is parking spaces. We're going to be out there with measuring tapes again. We're going to be out there probably trying to dissect this thing, and it's just, I feel as it is right now, it could raise more issues than it's worth, at least in the police side of it. Can it be worked? Yeah, possibly. Can there be provisions that are put in there that are reasonable and measurable for law enforcement or code enforcement or whoever is going to take that action? Sure. 1038 obviously is standardized. You see it in a lot of cities. You see the private use of parking lots. You see a lot of collaboration with other businesses that are adjacent to them. The Water District, I believe, is next to Snow Peak. Excuse me. I don't know. There's been a discussion to rent their space. I don't know if there's anybody out there that has sat down and said, what can we do to help each other out? Because at the end of the day, I think people are talking about that. We're here to grow this community and to work together. So are there some of those discussions that are happening outside of this room and with these business owners to be creative? Because obviously Snow Peak came in here and they need food. There are other businesses that can probably benefit from some of these food trucks. But right now, as it sits, for me, it makes it more difficult for us to do what we need to do.
Thank you.
Someone else.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Dan, I had one quick question. So one of the concerns that I've had, besides the stuff that Ty was just referring to, human nature can be an issue, and so you get into this relationship where the brick and mortar allows the permit issue or does the permit issuance or goes to the city for that. Let's say a month later that relationship goes south. I couldn't find where we talk about how that permit is rescinded, and whether I saw something about a 30-day notice that has to be submitted, but seems like that can be problematic. So the question is, how does the brick and mortar decides that they want to get out of that relationship, they want to rescind the permit, what's the process look like?
I don't think we thought about the issue of the permit holder wanting to give it up. We only addressed our taking it away as an enforcement mechanism. I would assume, like any other permit, should business come and get the permit or license and then 6 weeks or 6 months later choose to not use it, they could come into City Hall or the police station or wherever and go, here, I don't want this anymore. Tear it up and make it invalid. I mean, again, but Counselor, I hadn't really thought about that scenario at all.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, how long were the, follow-up, how long are those permits good for? A year?
As proposed, it is an annual
It's an annual permit fee, so, okay. Okay.
I have, Mr. Mayor, I have a
Yes.
follow-up. So, to Councilor Mullins' point, so if I have I get a permit, I'm a brick and mortar, I have a permit, I have a food truck in front of my house, we have a in front of my business, we have a disagreement, and I say I no longer want you to be here. So the person the brick and mortar that has the permit is the one who makes the rules, and if they aren't in it, and then one more question to that. So say that the food truck isn't parking where they're supposed to be, or their generator's too loud, or they're breaking the rules. Is the responsibility back on the brick and mortar?
The responsibility will be on the permit holder.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. Who's held accountable in that process? The permit holder or the vendor?
Okay, I'm going to ask the question for you. Okay, so Mr. Mayor and Dan.
Would you repeat that question?
Yes. So in that situation, who's held accountable? So let's say you get, I don't know.
Dan, can I?
Yes.
I think what you're getting at is the problems that we were seeing in terms of the first item on here, which is enforcement of the program, right?
Yes.
I mean, this gets into a lot of what ifs. If they don't park in the right area, what is going to happen? If a food cart tries to park and there's a car already there, what happens? If we talk about economic liability, if a food cart is unable to park there, what is the two things they're going to do? They're going to come down to the city and say, move this car, which puts us in an awkward position for that car, an enforcement activity, or they're going to park in a different area, which is going to put them in violation, which is going to make it a code enforcement issue or enforcement issue on our part as well.
That could be a potential.
What if a business is unable to operate and park legally and comes and says, and I think we have this in our clause because we talked about this, and then says, I've been economically harmed because I advertised I was going to be in an area and I couldn't be there. Who's going to be held responsible for that? And this gets into the conversations we had as a staff. This gets into the conversations we had with the city attorney in terms of it's going to be really difficult to enforce these kind of rules on the public right-of-way. That's where that number one item is getting into. We're doing all these theoreticals, and again, the police department has expressed this isn't where we want to be spending our resources at.
And if those complaints come in on a Saturday morning when no one's at City Hall, who do we complain to? Who do they complain to?
Mr. Mayor, I don't think they will, because they have to be parked there, what is it, after 4 p.m.?
Okay, whatever. This free-for-all discussion is, I guess, moving along. Please, get in this. Okay, are we making some progress?
Hi, I'm Keith Blocker, and I currently live in Salem, but I own Rising Star Studios. It sounds, from what I've been hearing, it sounds like a lot of this issue is around the food truck down on Water Street. That's where that keeps coming up. And I don't know all the nuances of the corner of First and Water, but that's where the old DMV used to be, and there's that area where the food trucks have been there in the past. And that's on Water, and this pub is just down the street. So I was wondering, I just thought, why couldn't the pub call the food truck, and the food truck could just walk it down to the pub? and then they would be on this private land. And, or they could just deliver it. They could have a car there, and they could just do their, that could be the place where they all cook their food, and then they Uber it to the to the locations just downtown. I mean, it's going to take them a couple of minutes. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Thank you.
I'm seeing an opportunity here for, when I get my mobility scooter, to just go from the food cart down to the pub and deliver mostly warm food. Has possibilities. I'm being facetious, I'm sorry. Someone else?
Laura Beagle again, 623 Summerview. So with the permits, the way that you're talking about, if there is a business that is asking another business to be in their spot doing business, I would assume, or probably because of my background, I would assume they would have some sort of business agreement. And that business agreement could be submitted with the permit application if that food cart isn't owned by the business and where it's sitting. I would assume they would have some sort of business agreement with the person, with that business that they're going to sit with. So that business agreement can identify the liability and identify who is liable for these situations that are coming up. If that's the situation that people are worried about, ask them to submit their business agreement with the application.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
And therein lies the problem, is that, and this is where I keep getting kind of wrapped around the axle as I'm doing the analysis on this, is that it's not the business's parking spot. It's the people of Staten's parking spot. That's what makes it the right of way. So where I get hung up is that the business is having that permission to give the taxpayer's spot, that there's parking issues, the enforcement, the liability. But is it really theirs to sign a permit over to another business to do business, the food truck to do business? That's my issue.
Mr. Mayor, can I add just something to that?
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things we're missing here as well, and I'd just like to point that out, not all parking stalls are directly in front of businesses. You may have a parking stall at a business that they have a business there. The parking stall is not directly in front of them. And anybody that knows the downtown area, it might be right in between two businesses. And we're not really looking at the fact that what is the business next door, what are their feelings on this food cart in front? We're not looking at that. And I think it's something that just should be thought about because not all parking stalls are directly in front of businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yo.
That is in our staff report under equitability, and that's what we meant by equitability, was that problem right there.
I didn't see what that exactly meant, but yeah, right, very good.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
To that point, too, we've moved parking spots, look very good, by the way, in some of the areas, and there might be an issue. It says that you can't have a food truck in front of the door, and that may be the only viable parking spot for that specific business without either being sandwiched between two or, not having an option to be in front of that business. But I guess that just means that business wouldn't be able to utilize this.
So, as we thrash around, other thoughts and comments here? Please. Yeah, please, so we can all hear. Mr. Nguyen?
So I hear what everybody's saying. Let's say if you propose to designate a parking spot in front of certain businesses where they can only park at certain hours, kind of like a loading zone, where, it's already marked out. You can park here at this certain amount of time and serve for this many amount of time, and you have to leave. You can't park there all day long. Because most of our trucks, we don't go to one place and park all day. We do lunches or dinner or whatnot, and we take our truck home and we clean it and prep and get ready for the next day. So if you have a designated spot where each truck can serve, then you wouldn't have that problem with people parking in it, kind of like a loading zone type deal.
Okay, interesting point.
So,
can I ask a question? I see Ken Sharp back there too. Is the food truck parking kind of working on private property as it is now?
it is working on property, but we're all each own businesses.
Right.
So we work together with other businesses that need our services, and we need their patronage or services also. So we kind of work together with each other to make things work. We're not here trying to take business away from restaurant that's already here established or whatnot. So, I mean, the hours that we work, usually most businesses are closed down for the evening anyways.
Okay.
Or we just do lunches at office business. That's what we do. I don't know about other trucks that operate. So in the evening time, that would be the hours that most business in town will be shut down for the evening for some, because they're done for the day.
Okay.
So
I just think, just a thought here, that our real concern here is there just isn't enough of these private parking places to accommodate the number of food carts, which is where the sort of push for parking in public areas is coming from. That may be too simplistic, but I'm wondering if that isn't part of it.
I don't think it's the problem with having the private places where we can park at. I believe it's like just having the right to operate and do your business.
Okay.
That's what we're fighting for, is be able to park on street side and serve businesses that want us to be there.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I just, we're going to